And that sounds kind of easy, but ask yourself, who are you? Who are you really, right? It's not like we haven't addressed that question before, but I think it's always good to remind yourself of that kind of fundamental question. Like, who are you in the world? If you don't know who you are.
Hey there, investing feels overwhelming right now, doesn't it? So complicated, so many decisions, but leaving your money in the bank is not a great idea. It's losing value every single day. So if it's stressing you out and driving you nuts, why not invest smarter with Noble Gold Investments? Precious metals are simple and real. There isn't a company on the stock market today that was around 2,000 years ago, but gold was. It's always been there through wars, disasters, and turmoil. Reliable, dependable, and authentic. That's why you can't go wrong with precious metals. They've always had your back. Noble Gold Investments American-based experts will show you how to set and forget your IRA or 401k. You'll get a dedicated professional assigned to you. No hassle, no call centers. This month, Noble Gold Investments is giving a free quarter-ounce gold standard coin with every qualifying IRA investment. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com to claim your gold coin. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, it's John Nolan here. Welcome to the very first edition of the Naked Truth Show. My co-host, the one and only Frank Jacob. How are you doing, brother?
Great, John. Good to be with you here and to explore this new challenging format.
We've been cooking this up for a while, you and I, talking about it, trying to get schedules in order. So for now, we're gonna do this for once a month, and then we are planning on ambitiously going for twice a month, do the Naked Truth Show. What is this about, Franco, for you, Franco,
American, right? No, what it's about is, it's clear to me that the whole title says it, the naked truth. For me, it was inspired by this poem about the naked truth, right? This thing about the truth went into this bath, and then the lie came and stole her clothes and stuff, and then went into the world like as the truth. It's an interesting story, but the whole point is here, I believe that we're reaching a kind of an end spurt into the timeline game. Like we're reaching a critical point. People are kind of, I don't know how it is on your end, but over here in Europe, people are kind of going crazy in a lot of ways. But also people are having like incredibly powerful visionary experiences, right? And so I think, what it's about with the title about the naked truth, when the truth is naked, it's like we're not trying to water it down with any things that are just, we're worried about maybe we could hurt such and such, feelings or ideologies and stuff. No, we want to boldly go, as they say in Star Trek, which has become very woke, by the way, and it's disgusting, but go where nobody has gone before and really just kind of challenge things out there, even our own stuff, right? And see how it holds up, because I think a lot of people want the real truth now, and they're tired of this sort of watered down, here's a piece of the truth, 80% of the truth, 90% of the truth, but we're holding back. The only reason we would be holding any truth back in this show is because we really don't know. But we're going to lay out the truth that we do know.
Exactly. And it's okay to say, I don't know, but I can have speculation opinion, right? You asked the question, how's it around here? I'll tell you how it is. In my perception, normal is gone. Normal has vanished. We had normal before. It doesn't mean it was true, it was right. It was just normal. It was a normative behavior in society, and there were things that were set in stone in our societal structures, tax deadlines, forms that you had to fill out, sort of things that kept people in line. Those things, they're still there, but they're kind of gone. And you can see it. Most people have faded away from this normative standards, and they're either drugging themselves or drinking or whatever, or they're awakening on the beautiful spectrum of things, and they're simply seeing the madness for what it is. Now we've had an infusion, and we're going to talk about this today. We've had an infusion of technology around us into the bodies, right? But we also have an information sphere that is virtually impossible to navigate if you just do it with the mind. So that's impossible because there's so much purposeful dis and misinformation out there, to use the political correct speak here. So you wanted to touch on a mass hysteria event that was the solar eclipse, and we covered this quite extensively because of this hysteria. So what's your take on that?
Well, I appreciate the way you handled it was very very delicate, and I got respect, man. That was good, because for me, I was looking at this historical eclipse over 6 months ago with some of us were looking at it because because of the potential esoteric significance of the crossing of these eclipses over a place in America that apparently had something to do with secret societies. But it was just something that you can kind of speculate, because you never know. And there are such things as geomancy and energy spots and ley lines, etc. But they're all over the globe, right? And so, and anyway, months went by, nothing. And then all of a sudden the eclipse got into the news cycle. And I was just blown away by how many, even, friends of ours were suddenly it was this, oh, there's this big event and it's this amazing, eclipse, and it's going to change. And then, there was, you had some general or previous general, ex-general on talking about freaky, emergency declarations of states, orders and things like that. It was all, and there were news reports about eclipse sickness and things that people would have, they would have vision. It started to foment this hype. And I was disappointed in how many of the people that I respect kind of went down that pathway right away without taking a step back. Because the first thing I thought of was like, come on, I mean, what is this, the once in a very rare opportunity, And then I found out, I did some research. I mean, there's up to, well, how many eclipses happen every year, right? That's the first question I had. Who knows that question, right? Well, I didn't really know. I assumed that probably at least one a year, right? Well, guess what? It's like up to 5, right? A annular and a full eclipse, and mostly, and then a couple of partials, right? So that means an eclipse is pretty normal.
No, I agree with you. What really struck us, and what really was, so there are all these counties and states coming out, and they're doing disaster declarations. You're right. A disaster is has a particular definition. So if you don't fulfill that definition, it's kind of weird to declare that. You declare a state of emergency. And they said, well, it's because of all the influx. But we had a total eclipse in 2017, and we had no disaster declarations and no emergency states, which I went back and checked, right? So it's, and did we not have influx? We had influx in 2017 of everything. So
of course,
my question is, do you think that all of this was sort of created? This was my theory. They put these declarations and states of emergency out, which puts them in a different, it almost puts them in a different legal framework for that time period, which allows them to do things that they usually couldn't. Movement of certain things wouldn't be as weird because, oh, it's all because of the eclipse. Do you think that this is what happened, that they just kind of did things that they usually couldn't?
Well, I mean, I thought about that too, but the thoughts that I had was like, okay, have we become, it has this whole transgender wokeness, environmental social governance, softening of society, and the Beetlejuice having its effect on crossing the brain barrier and shutting off the hippocampus and stopping the ability for us to have comparative analysis during our sleep cycle, our REM sleep cycle, actually finally gotten to the point where people are so dumbed down that they actually think that an eclipse is something that's an emergency. That was one of the things I was thinking about. Like, okay, can it really be true that we've really got stooped to this level already, right? That this has now become an emergency, right? Do you want to say something? Or
well, let me just put it this way. I don't think your theory is outlandish.
Right. So that was the next thing I was thinking, okay, is it really? And the other thing I was thinking about is, that saying, never cry wolf, right? What does that mean, right? What does never cry wolf really mean? For those who don't, and you can't assume these days anyone knows anything anymore. To cry wolf is an analogy for somebody who's saying the wolf is coming, and everyone panics and runs inside. And he just did it as a phony act just to scare everyone, right? Well, what happens then the next time when there really is a wolf coming, and then the person cries, a wolf is coming, and everyone's like, screw off, you screwed us last time, you we got it. You faked us. So we're not going to fall for that again. And then the wolf comes and mangles everyone, right? So it's the analogy of the story is that by desensitizing people to the value, to the validity of official announcements, they become desensitized mentally to when to really step up when it's really necessary. I mean, we over here were getting messages on our handies. Oh, this is a trial. This is a state of emergency to test if your phone's, receiving this, even if it's off or not in the network, right? And I'm like, what is that all about, right? What state of emergency? We have never had these since I've had a handy. Never.
A cell phone for all Americans out there. It's a cell phone.
Oh yeah, sorry, a cell phone, a mobile. Yeah. And so we've never had them. We've never, ever, and now all of a sudden we have them multiple times per year. So in the back of my mind, it's like, okay, there's something are they gearing up for something? And they're just not telling us. They're not coming clean. They're not giving us the naked truth.
Oh, wait. They are. Because, the Scandinavian prime ministers have been talking about ramping up for war. People need to get prepared. The NATO guy said that. The German, the Minister of Defense. So it's not like they're not saying, listen, a war is sort of kind of a possibility now. So I do think maybe they're not putting it in the same context. But if you look at the signals, it's definitely there. But is the question, is it legitimate or is it only to stir up fear? What do you think?
Well, I don't know if it's legitimate. I've heard this now since the Ukraine war started. Okay, living over here in Europe, we've been under this potential. There has been announcements of handing out iodine, and it's like this is going back years. Okay, and and nothing ever happens. So I'm beginning to believe more and more in my worldview is that there's this narrative running, being used by the mainstream, and it's completely scripted. There's no reality base to it whatsoever.
So is it like that BBC show? Remember that from 1968?
That show. That shows. Yeah, exactly.
The Newsbenders. We had it. We'll put it in description. We had it on a little while ago. Is it like that?
Right. Along those lines.
Where they show you it's all just scripted, and basically whatever you don't see in your vicinity, question it. It might not be there. Are you saying people think we don't have nuclear weapons? People think we don't have these capabilities. Some people even say that nothing's happening at CERN. This is just a show, just a facade. What do you say to that? It's hard to really know, but you know people that were at CERN, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, CERN is an interesting topic, okay, because that goes out, because we know during the eclipse, one of the things that came out was, oh my God, CERN is doing an experiment on the 8th of April of all times, right? And yes, you had to dig a little bit when that first came out, but what you find out is that they were doing an experiment, but they were doing a whole bunch of experiments. And for them to do experiments on an eclipse makes total sense, because what do they work with at CERN? They work with magnetic fields. And the electromagnetic field of the Earth is strongly impacted whenever there is kind of an eclipse event. Although the eclipse event, didn't take place over CERN, it took place on another continent altogether. There is something that happens during every single solar eclipse, and that is, we are, all of us are being kind of bombarded by, if we're going to lean in on something called the particle theory of reality, okay? The particle theory of reality bases its idea that there's something called neutrinos, which are what form into protons, electrons, all these elements that later form into molecules, etc. And that neutrinos in that sense are like manifestation molecules, as I like to call them, which are things that you shape matter out of. And if we really are these, if we break away from the particle model and see us as spiritual beings, as sentient beings, who have the ability to, we're actually not physical matter, we're actually energy, we're waves. And waves precede matter. There's something called the wave structure of matter. So when you look at things like neutrinos, you could see that we as waves use things like neutrinos to then turn them into particles to then manifest so-called reality, even though we know it doesn't really exist. We just see matter as a way to kind of concretize the ideas that we formulate as sentient beings to create the world, right? That's part of the whole thing. So CERN doing an experiment, because, their whole thing is based on the Higgs boson. You know, we can talk about this a little bit, and that there's this, you know, this.
Wait, who discovered the Higgs
It was
boson?
discovered by this guy called Peter Higgs. And
when did he die?
Well, as a matter of fact, John, he
Come on, if we, I mean,
he died. Guess when? I'm going to give you one guess.
Well, he died on Monday. I mean,
oh my God, he died on the eclipse.
He died.
Maybe sorry, he went into the portal.
Yeah, maybe he was the ghost in the machine. Maybe he was the guy in the portal.
Oh yeah,
sorry, I interrupted you, but that was the Higgs boson. That's where you were.
Right, he's the inventor, and he just passed. Actually, he went into the portal at CERN on the 8th during the experiment, and he traveled into the parallel universe. Well, anyway,
you say this as if it isn't possible, and if it's so. What? Come on.
Well, look,
today,
look,
would it really surprise you, Frank?
It actually, you know, it wouldn't, because, you know, getting down to the nitty gritty, what the hell is CERN? What are they really doing there, right? Because
okay, yeah,
I'm, you know, and we've talked about this on some of the interviews that I did maybe last year about Einstein and, you know, this relativity stuff, and you know, basically, you know, I'm really moving away rapidly from that whole particle science model of the universe, the black hole, the Big Bang. Right, all this particle stuff. And Higgs boson, Peter Higgs, let me put him up on the screen just for the hell of it so you can see him. There's the guy, right? You know, he literally set in motion what people are saying is a $1 billion industry of basically atheists who, you could say, and I would say the harsh way of saying it is, it's become a money laundering operation without compare. So, because if there are no particles, okay, and this whole concept of dark matter and formulation of particles, and I can show you, okay, I can show us, you know, that there is plenty of research and plenty of scientists who have shown us that after all the decades of research and the billions of dollars and euros or whatever they're using over there, Swiss francs, that they've spent, they have not proven that there is such a thing as dark matter. They have not proven it.
In scientism, it's so wonderful because you have a theory, you have a project, you get the funding, and because nobody understands what you're doing anyways, who knows what you're doing with all those billions of dollars? You know? So this
is what they're doing, right? These are the headlines, right? CERN tests world most powerful particle accelerator, dubbed the Big Bang machine, right? You know, right at the solar eclipse, etc. Right? Well, that's what they're doing over there. But if that doesn't really exist, then really you have to ask yourself, you know, what are they doing over there, right? And there's this German scientist who wrote something called the Higgs fake. And I love putting these kind of things up. If we're talking about Higgs, you know, how disrespectful to, you know, a couple of days after his death to be putting out that he's a fake. But sorry, dude, you know, let's face it, what you were talking about and what you set in motion, the billions that were spent on this technology has produced absolutely zilch. And when you think about where that money could have been spent, okay, this is where I often come from, like knowing that there's all these alternative technologies out there which never got footing. Because why? Because there's this elbowing aside gang of thug scientists who are scrambling to hoard the grant money so that they can build on the foundational model of this atheist model of particles, right? So, you know, we have this guy here, I'll put him up on the screen too, right? Alexander Unzicker is his name. And he, you know, these are essentially the points that he's making, right? This is the so-called standard model, right? And essentially none of the physics to date have ever proven that it exists, right? And the whole scientific convictions in the community are established by blind faith. And I think you touched on that just a minute ago by calling scientism. It's a kind of form of religion, you could say, right? And so
I think it's the biggest religion in the world today, because no matter if you look at the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, they all pretend that they have faith in their own religion when really they follow scientism. They all do the same things in their life.
Absolutely. So you have, you know, you've got basically statements like from Dr. Stacy McGaugh, right? These are not insignificant people, right? We've had to sort of invoke some tooth fairies to keep things sensible, right? So, and you have all kinds of of scientists, like these are some of the headlines I sort of cherry picked for today, right? Scientists looking for invisible dark matter can't find any, right? Observations of rotating galaxies could be explained without dark matter, which may require changes to prevailing theories, right? Of course, this is a key point here, right? Dark matter hunt heats up with first results from the world's first biggest detector. This is something that they have called WIMPs. I love the word, right? Weak interacting massive particles. Well, guess what? After all the research they've done, they don't find any WIMPs, man. There's no WIMPs in the universe, right? They don't exist, right? Then you have things like no trace of dark matter in gamma ray background, which is another way they test for whether dark matter might exist. And no matter where you look, it doesn't matter, right? All of the new research coming out is showing, whether it's the Artemis emulator or some other form of telescope, whether it's, whatever form of technology they're using to try and prove the dark matter model, it ain't working.
Are they actually confirming our long-held statement that there is no darkness, there's only absence of light? Is that what they're saying?
I would tend to agree with that, John.
What happens when you light a match in a dark room, man? It just it's not that you push out the darkness; it's you just have returned the light. That's all that has happened. So I got to ask you something, Frank, because I've been thinking about this. I really don't know, but I've had these weird experiences over the years, and especially over the last 15 years, where I would first I would experience sort of a little bit of mass spiritual awakening, right? I would feel it in people, conversation shift, energy shift. You feel this thing coming up, and then boom, one morning you wake up and everything changed. And I call it the plastification of the world. Everything seems a little more plastic, a little more artificial. And I've been looking for the explanation for this phenomenon for 10, 15 years now. And then when I researched all this, you find the Mandela effect, which just gives a name to certain experiences that almost everybody had. And then you find the blatant signaling of certain CERN scientists that couldn't help themselves, I guess, or it was all just for show, and put out these cryptic messages where they basically said, oh yeah, we did change reality. We did shift time. We did shift timelines. We did shift dimensions. We don't know exactly, but something is happening. I don't know if this is happening at CERN and this is what they're really doing, if it's time travel, but we know that there's too much evidence to suggest that this doesn't exist. So what do you think? Where are these shifts and changes coming from? And why do so many people feel weird and have these experiences?
Well, I definitely do believe that now that we've cleared up the matter of what they're really doing over there, having nothing to do with particles and dark matter, which doesn't exist, I'm absolutely certain from everything that I've researched and put together, and even the webinars for the last year or two with respect to looking glass technology and things like that, that when you create massive magnetic fields, I mean, we're talking about magnetic fields, tunnels that span miles and miles, and you begin to move things in counter rotational directions at a very, very high velocity in these magnetic fields, that you are tampering with things that have to do with the fundamental structure of the matter of the universe that we experience as reality. And the proof that this is actually going on was actually it's no secret. I have a slide of that too. Look at this. This is what Sergio Bertolucci, who was the research head at CERN, said. And I think 2006 going back a long time already. The Large Hadron Collider could open a gateway to another dimension, and something could come through that gateway, or we could send something through it, right? And so I think they know that we know that this is one of their goals, right? And if you look at this thing, like when they opened the tunnel leading to CERN, they had a huge opening ceremony.
Oh, the Gotthard, the Gotthard
The
tunnel.
Gotthard tunnel, right? And in that
Yeah,
ceremony, they basically did the performance of, you know, like you could just say Beelzebub,
they didn't
or
have a ceremony; they had a ceremony.
they had a ceremony.
It was a ceremony.
And in this ceremony, basically, you know, there's this death process that takes place, and then a resurrection that takes place, and the resurrected God, which reemerges, is the horned God, right? And that's why when you think of Cernanos, right, the word itself is speaking about you could say like an ancient god, a pantheon that is the horned god, right? The god of creation and death and the earth, right? And even this symbol right in front of the door, right? Shiva represents the god of destruction and resurrection, right? So you're asking yourself, I mean, is this what is really going on here? Is this activation of these massive energy fields that are having an effect? Absolutely, because there is something that happens when they do these experiments. I have the name of it is really interesting. Like, you know, when there's a sonic boom.
Yep.
Right. There's something called you know, when they cross the speed of sound.
You can actually see it too.
You see it, and you have this
and you hear
sound,
it later.
right?
Yeah.
Well, apparently, CERN is also a time machine.
And literally, I really think that. Like, this is what all my research led me to. So do you think that too?
You know, I know it because here's some research papers that I can show you, some headlines that were put out in German research science papers that were describing how essentially CERN is the world's first time machine. And it is interesting that, you know, when you go into these massive, when you generate these massive fields, what happens during these experiments, and this is what happened during something called the Awake experiment on the 4th of June, 2016. You saw this bluish thing happen. And there's a name for that, and similar to how there's a sonic boom, it's called the Cherenkov radiation effect. Okay. And as soon as they began opening these, what they're calling portals, guess what you started seeing? You may have seen this or heard of this, right? So yep. They started having phenomena on the planet that they never had before, like these cobalt lightnings and stuff that are going from the ground to the ionosphere, right? Here's a picture. You can see it from above, from the, you know, the space station here. And they're tying in also something called HARP, which I'm sure people listening know a little bit about what that is. And when you combine CERN with HARP, you begin to play with time in this sense. And so I absolutely believe that there is something to the idea that they might be shifting time. And shifting time could be shifting on a very subtle level what we perceive in the world around us. If there's been an anomalous event somewhere that has shifted time, even if it's localized, it'll bleed out and have a ripple effect, because everything has an effect. And what you're talking about when you describe having some strange feeling, some strange physical phenomena that you feel something has affected you, I am absolutely certain that there is a tie-in to what is happening down in that facility in Switzerland, unbeknownst to all of us, good, willing, and unsuspecting population.
I'm absolutely certain too that that here's what I think the greatest weapon formed against the human family, and there's many weapons formed, by the way, against human spirit, is actually time travel. Maybe it's not as maybe we don't look at Back to the Future as how this works, but I think if you have a spiritual awakening, which is, by the way, this is the thing they fear the most. Spirit recognizing itself is literally the death blow to any control agenda. That's the worst that could happen. So anytime I feel like this is happening on a large scale, where we're reaching sort of this critical mass point, something shifts. And I literally think what they do is they go what we perceive to be into the past and simply turn the screws just a little bit different. And so we wake up and we find a slightly different reality that dampens that spiritual awakening. And that's been happening But I also feel, and this is purely speculative, by the way, all of this is just, I feel that if we reach a certain level of consciousness, that won't be able to stop us any longer. So I think all those weapons formed are starting to lose their effect that they used to have. How do you see this, Frank?
You know, you're leading into a topic here that I think is foundational to what this is all about, and what the meaning of this so-called portal is all about. And it goes back to, you know, you were talking, I think, recently about you know, worldviews, and some of them being, for example, Gnosticism. And there are these creatures that are called archons, that are described in those ancient texts. And it seems like there's this battle for these archons to enter and penetrate into our reality. And, you know, without going into the whole mythology behind it, in fact, that's something I'm working on for maybe a new webinar pitch. But anyway, we'll talk about.
No. We're going to talk about that in a moment.
What we're talking about here is we're talking about a primordial battle that is taking place between entities who have no business being here, who are extremely jealous of our world, of our reality, who have at their disposal brilliant technology. They are highly advanced in that sense, to the point where they are able to create simulation technology that they can superimpose over our world and make us believe, if they can't get into our world, their goal is to try and get us into theirs. And so what's going on right now is there's been an increase in an urgency. You could feel, I feel it, and I think you feel it, and many feel it. There's a showdown coming. We talked about that right at the very start of this today. There's this urgency, there's this acceleration happening, where there's going to be a decisive point where, if we were to realize who we really are, that we are the real thing, we are reality, and the earth is our damn domain. Sorry for my language, but this is our place. This is not their place. And they have no business being here. And at some point, we're going to shatter their attempts to try and hijack our consciousness, and just shut them off completely. And what's going on is that this awakening process is something that they want to try and hinder. And which is also, incidentally, one of my big criticisms. And I know there's a lot of people that are probably on my case right now for, you know, negating the power, positive energy of the eclipse meditations all around the world. And I know they took place, and they had random generator readings that were done that showed indeed more cohesion and stuff like that. But they've had them for decades, and it doesn't matter if they bring cohesion to a point, you know, for a few hours, and it goes, if it dissipates again. What we have to realize is we can't keep giving ourselves a date, an event for us to say, well, now we're going to go step into our power. We should be getting down to business at every single day. It's like, you know, why have Christmas once a year? We could be giving ourselves presents every day. You know, we just, when we give all this attention on the events, we actually are taking a little bit of the power away from our own inherent creative, massive creator ability every single moment of any time. In fact, we're such geniuses, John, at creating wave into matter that, you know, we've created bodies we believe are solid. You know, I mean, what more convincing hardcore evidence do you need in, you know, in the physical, other than the fact that you're manifesting a body and you're doing it so well you don't even realize it. It's like you don't even realize your heart. You don't steer your heart or tell your lungs to breathe or tell your eyes to see, right? These are all amazing things that we have right away into our, you know, the human anthropos, if we want to go to, you know, to this gnostic, you know, kind of terminology. So I think this is kind of what's going on in my perspective. What do you think?
You know, when you were talking about the sort of the archonic system and how it works, and how this construct here works, And a lot of times, because when you're explaining this, you're breaking the barrier, you're breaking down the barrier between the visible and the invisible world. But that's just our senses. We perceive so little. So the invisible world is all around us. It's not out there somewhere. It's here all around us. We simply, our senses don't perceive that. But let's take that concept and apply it to what we can see. You said this is a force that is feeding off of our consciousness, feeding off of our life force. That's what it needs to power its technology and everything else that it uses to control us. But why is that? I wonder why that is so hard to understand. Look at how the industrial system works. Industrial system works exactly the same way. There's an entity on top that is feeding off of the creativity and the life force and the invested attention and time of people who are producing and working and doing all of that and reaping most of the rewards. That's how the system works, because it is archonic. It's an archon system. This is not the human system. This is not how we were designed to be. So all we have to do is really observe our reality and see what happens over 40 years, what happens over the average life of a 40 years of work. People get weaker, 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 weaker. The life force is sucked out of them. By the time they hit retirement age, which is, by the way, of course, being raised all the time, they have no life force to do anything. Then you'll be able to enjoy life. Well, guess what? If you never learned over the past 40, 50 years how to enjoy life, you won't enjoy it in the last 10, 15 years of your life. So it isn't hard for me to see that. But what do you think? And this is an issue we discussed often, is what is sort of the breaking point? Because for consciousness to rise in our human world, usually something bad has to happen. I mean, that's how we're wired. I don't know why, but we first have to get to that bottom point, hit rock bottom, and then we're willing to change. And currently, I don't see that mass movement yet. Will that be an external event? Will it be a solar event? What do you think will happen that creates that change you were talking about?
Well, I think that it's going to be, on the one hand, a conscious, human consciousness driven event, in the sense that we are, sentient beings, and more of us are waking up every day. No doubt about it. I know I tend to point out some of the dark clouds on the horizon, but not for the obsession of being into the clouds and the darkness, but just to say, hey, people, there's some clouds coming on the horizon. It might be good to roll up the tents and get into shelter and, prepare yourself for it. So these events and this recognition is cognizance around the world of something isn't quite right. Obviously was kicked into acceleration when the Beetlejuice began to spread around the planet. That was when, and I said, we're seeing a lot of that coming up now. It's being worked up. To my, my impression is it's not being worked up enough. It's kind of like periphery on the outside skirts. People are.
It's lip service. To me, it's just lip service.
It's lip service, but no heads are rolling. No accountability is taking place yet. And so, I think it seems like people need to kind of reach a point where there's no alternative, where they're backed completely against the wall, and they're standing in front of the fire squad, and there's a door over there that they could maybe make it to if they dart off right now and sprint. It's like they're waiting. It's like humanity seems to be waiting for this last possible moment where you could still do something, and in order to kick maybe into gear. Now, the question is, will that be enough for them? Will the dragon that rises in us, be sufficiently powerful to crush those opposing forces? Or will it have been something we've already crossed the line and it's like, nope, sorry guys, you blew it this round. We're going to go for a new cycle of deep darkness. And at some point you'll rise again. The experiment resets, another great reset, if you want to call it that way. And we have another go at it, because that's the rules of the universe. The game continued. The show must go on. Okay, that's on the one level, on the one hand. On the other hand, we have some geophysical events that are in the periphery on the horizon, which could trigger it. I wonder if I have anything that I can show on that. Yeah, here it is. Last year we talked a lot about something called a pole shift, or I think it was the year before even. And I kept talking about readings that were showing the magnetic North Pole moving toward a 40-degree mark, where people were saying, certain scientists were saying, we don't know what'll happen when we cross that 40-degree point. It could mean that the pole shift happens, right? And then the 40-degree mark was reached. And what happened? Well, nothing really, again. And another,
at least that's what we think.
That's what we think. That's what we think, right? And there's interesting thing that happened is that the magnetic pole position began to reverse. However, the fact is our magnetosphere, and this is something that's readable. This is readable with real scientific instruments. The magnetosphere of the Earth is diminishing. We are in a solar maximum. We are in a place in the arm of the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, where we are in an unprecedented place where we are exposed to and experiencing exposure to energy like we have never experienced in the history, or at least this version of modern man civilization. And if you look at
people feel it, Frank. People feel it. People feel it.
But take a look at this, right? This is essentially the latest observations that are showing us that in 2023 we reached kind of this place where after which the shift of the magnetosphere, and you can see on the bottom right corner, this is a smaller diagram. I don't know if my mouse shows up on the screen, but there's this, you can see the bigger drag where it sort of dips off, and it looks kind of like the financial system diagrams you see these days, which we can look at. We can talk about some other time. But essentially what you're showing here is that purple spot with the red arrow pointing to it is where we are now. And so even though we haven't had a magnetosphere shift yet, and the pole shift hasn't happened yet, those scientists who are publishing these papers, their prognosis is somewhere between, hold on for this number, 2030 and 2050, right?
But we, of course, we have the small reset. I mean, this is archaic data, right? And where there's a next
right. Archaics is talking about what, 2043, I believe, or something, right?
2042, I think.
2042. These people are saying 2030. The Schwabsters are talking about the 2030 date. It's a big date. I mean, look, we don't even know what year it really is, okay? And we have to rely on empirical data passed to us from a fake past about historical time and events and stuff. So we can measure it in terms of where we are in the position, and we can look to mythology, and we can see that routinely and periodically in our history, what survived was primitive drawings on caves, because look, if technology goes, what do you got left? Stones, right? But you have indications in historical petroglyphs and things that this shift or this reset seems to happen in cycles of, they say 26,000 years. Some people say 12,000 years, but let's just say on, even a scale of 6,000 years is almost unfathomable for most of us. We can't imagine even 10 years, right? But imagine 6,000, which is 600 times that, right? We can't. We just know that there's these cycles. And these cycles take place. And these cycles have, if we look to assume that we are not just rocks and molecules that bang together through, 11 billion years and by accident consciousness emerged, but we are brave and bold enough to assume that there is a creative force and that we are the sons and daughters of that creator being, that we are sentient beings, that we are participating in the creation process of this universe, that these cycles mean that there are resets that take place, and they don't necessarily mean the extinction of our race, but they might mean the extinction of the living standard and the infrastructure that we have built up around us, which we've put on the holy shrine of, of existence, where we worship technology. I mean, just look at the way artificial intelligence is being worshipped right now. So that's what I would throw into the pot.
Well, just that, Frank. Just a little, the thing. I'm always, while we're talking, I'm imagining, well, what if kind of, the average person who just learned what they learned in school, then they went about their lives and they did their jobs and they watched their TV programs and whatnot. And all of a sudden they stumble upon this conversation. I don't mean that in a derogatory way whatsoever, but just we're sort of, because of all these conversations, we're kind of matter of fact about it. And sometimes we just have to, I think, scale back and go, okay, let's take a 40,000 foot view. I know this is sort of very deep into the rabbit hole, but we're actually bringing the rabbit hole up and saying, this is what actually might be going on here. And what we were shown and told is a completely fake story. This is probably the biggest jump or leap that people make is here you have mainstream life, you know, that is it's very similar actually all over the world, some cultural differences, but for the most part. And so then you go, oh, some, you know, yeah, there's corruption. So some things weren't quite true in this. But the deeper you go, the more you realize mainstream life is a complete fiction. There's no basis in reality for that. And it only functions within an artificial set of parameters in this society. Even as soon as you go 10 miles into the woods, none of it matters anymore. None of it is true anymore. And you have to deal with a completely different reality. What is your way, Frank? Because I get asked this a lot. We get asked this a lot. How do you discern what information seems to be important and what not? Because so often I get accused of, you talk about these things, why don't you just envision and co-create and talk positive things and just talk about the new earth and talk about everything that we should be creating rather than pointing out what the problems are? How do you discern? How do you do that?
You know, that's a hard question. I think the way if I look back on the start of this year, and, you know, trying to kind of shift gears into the next chapter, I just don't want to continue the same old story. I want to build on something because I want us to advance things. I'm not satisfied with the pace of laissez-faire. Everything's cool. The white hats have won. You know, it's just a matter of, it's already happened in the fifth dimension. We all hear this stuff, right? In the astral, whatever. And it's only going to take some time before it sickers down into our reality. Well, I'm an impatient guy. I don't want to wait for that. And I think what motivates me, or what helps me to discern between whether something is genuine or worth my time, is how I feel about it in my heart. Because my heart plays a role in terms of, if my heart's not in it, there's that saying, if your heart's not into it, right? And I noticed that I've had a few failed starts, you know, this year. I thought I would go in a certain direction. And then I just as a few days went by, I just felt that there was no juice behind it. And that can only have that. And when I went inside and I tried to figure out, well, why, you know, where is this coming from? Why is there no motivation there? Why am I not all excited? I realized I can't stimulate excitement just by turning on a knob, right? Which is another thing that always kind of irritates me about people that do mass meditations that say, now visualize being in joy or whatever, right? I mean, it's like, well, I can't just do that. I can't just go into joy. You know what gets me excited about joy is when I've had an aha moment and something new has entered my perception that has the potential to radically grow and evolve my understanding of life and my life and why I'm here, my mission of being here, who I am and why I'm here. And that isn't something I can just turn on the switch. That happens through going, you know, into life and trying to constantly be asking those questions. And eventually, if you are disciplined, even if it's frustrating, you'll have that aha moment again. And that is not artificial. That is something that's very unmistakably authentic. And whenever I have a moment like that, I know exactly what I have to do. I don't need much sleep all of a sudden, you know, where I was like, you know, sleeping later or just getting up slow, you know, or not feeling inspired. Suddenly, like, I go to bed late and I get up early because I know, like, I'm just energized. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about. And
I'm exactly the same way. Listen, we get emails, calls, text messages about what we should be doing and how this would be a great idea for us. And this is the person we should interview next. And I appreciate every suggestion. It's, you know, I love input, like, because we love our audience and we love hearing from them. But I can't, 99% of the time, I can't oblige, because the word that was chosen, by the way, it came through for this channel, was inspired. And it doesn't necessarily mean I'm here to inspire you every day. It means that we are sharing what we feel authentically inspired to talk about and to do. That's what this word really means. That doesn't mean it's always just positive stuff and always just, you know, unicorns and rainbows. But I think it's like, the more you synchronize with that, which you could call purpose, right? It's something that is in you, and this life, this world, this fake matrix teaches you not to synchronize with it. It teaches you to look away from it and follow the norms. But the more you do, and the more often you follow it, the less capable you become of functioning on this matrix model. You just can't. So that's why you'll say, well, you get a great offer, Frank, from a company that wants you to shoot something that doesn't interest you at all, a film that you don't want to create about a subject that you might be even opposed to. It's a lot of money. And you go, nah, I don't care about the money, because and we're the same way. And that's why this is not it's not a business. You don't run it like a matrix business where you follow the profit chain, but you follow what's inside of you. And when you follow that, it's beautiful. Like, I mean, like you say, you have a smile on your face, and everybody else around you goes, you've been sitting there for freaking 16 hours.
Yes.
And I go, I know, but I'm pumped. Like, I'm in it. This is it. Expansion of spirit. I totally get that. You told me off camera, and then you hinted at it. You're working on something and you used a lot of cuss words in a good way. So tell me about what you're working on, man.
Well, you know, this follows right in with the last, you know, thing you were asking me about, in terms of like what, you know, what motivates you and what gets you up and what gets you excited and things. Well, you know, I'm working on a follow-up webinar, another webinar. I've been doing them roughly annually. You know, I should do them more often, but I'm not a machine like that. And like you said, I can't just do something I can't just pull a rabbit out of my hat, so to speak. And it's very difficult to build something that satisfies my need for exactness, for integrity, for scientific background. I like the mysticism. I like the philosophical, but I like to bridge it with, you know, the stuff that's tangible. And that's not always so easy. So I've stumbled on something, and, you know, I've been looking to try and frame reality, you know, for a while now on this timeline concept. And what I'm kind of formulating, what is a seed right now, which is growing in me, ties mysticism together with science, together with history, in the framework of timelines. And it's gonna, I mean, look, the stuff is so potent, John. I'm afraid of it in a way, because I think it's going to create a lot of bloody noses.
I love how you pace yourself. When off camera, you were like, this is fucking crazy. This is going to blow everyone's mind when they see it. This is literally what he said to me before the show. And now he goes all, no. No,
this is literally, you're right. Absolutely. You know, thanks for reminding me to be authentic. It is.
You're all proper, dude. You were all hyped up.
It's gonna blow people's minds. Absolutely. It's blowing my mind, right? Because it's like, you know, every now and then you find some piece of the puzzle. Oh, yeah. And you've got this sort of thing, and nothing seems to really and you know that if you just take that and put it out, it's okay, but it's a limp. Well, I won't say the word, but it's missing the power, right? And every now and then you stumble on a piece of the puzzle that seems to fill in all those places. That's not just the glue, but it adds another layer of power over top of the whole thing. And it's the kind of thing that I think could change foundational reality, or the picture of reality out there. I'm absolutely certain that if it were to get out to millions of people, if I had the Harari effect, that it would rock the planet, no doubt about it. And at the same time, pull, research information and persons and information forward out into that have been long suppressed, pushed into the fringes, because this kind of stuff is so potent that it cannot be accepted by the status quo, because it means it's going to shatter the paradigms of things that people they've built their whole world picture around. And, I know that that's probably going to be dangerous in a way, but I mean, I like the danger. I'm willing to have someone challenge my reality picture, and I'm open-minded enough to say, okay, well, maybe I had that part wrong. Or go,
doesn't it happen? Doesn't it have to happen?
It has to. It has to. So we should all be rethinking and reconstructing the worldview that we have based on truth that was missing. And instead of, unfortunately, too many people out there that are academics are just slogging the same old book around for decades because that's what they studied.
That's their religion. That's their belief system.
This is the perfect way to look at it. And so this new webinar is going to venture down some new.
What's the projected name? Just if you can share, because I know we had A Tale of Two Timelines.
Right.
And that was a hit, right? I mean, that was home run out of the ballpark. People love it to this day. And then we had The Inner Looking Glass, right? I mean, 2 hits. By the way, we'll put them in the description for you, because if you go watch them support Frank's work, guess what? It makes it a little easier for him to work on a 3rd one. So what can you give us what's it going to be called?
Well, because I'm optimistic in the sense that I'm fighting for us to make this transition, to make this shift happen on the world and manifest this heaven on earth, right? At the same time, there's a little voice in my head that says, I don't know, man. I don't know if we're going to make it. And what if we don't? And I also noticed that I'm disappointed that so many awakened people and consciousness people are insisting that it happens now, like right now, or by such and such date, like in their lifetime. Well, what? Guess what? There is no time. What if it doesnn't happen in your lifetime? Are you going to?
That's what I always say. What, are you going to stop? Are you going to stop being who you are? Stop doing what you do?
So what I want to do is, I'm without forsaking, the mission. I feel it's important to take not powerful knowledge and package it in such a way so that should the worst go down, that there's something for the future, and I'm calling it time capsule for the future past. It's like a time capsule. You know what are time capsules? You put stuff in a time capsule. You've probably done those experiments in school, right? Everyone gets together and puts some stuff in, and then they bury it, somewhere in the schoolyard, because, who knows, in 150, 200, or 1,000 years, maybe it'll be a whatever, and someone will stumble on this time capsule. Well, I'm building a virtual time capsule that is going to have this information that I believe is essential to show the future generations another perspective. Because if the Goonies, the blockheads, succeed in imposing their limited version of reality on superficial reality, then there has to be in the future some people that stumble on this, an idea of that it wasn't just that way, that there was an alternative perspective, that there were smart people around that made an effort, that did everything they could in their power to preserve what they could of the truth and pass it forward to whoever it is that finds it.
I mean, and it's history repeating itself, because that's what we're doing. We're digging, we're researching, we're looking, we're discovering, we're pioneering and looking for things that we might find in our past, in history, in artifacts, and wherever we can find it in the field, so we can make sense of our story, how we got here. And so it's what I love, Frank, is that you and many others, we all have very similar intentions for this. There's others who are building their time capsules and who are building a body of knowledge that should be preserved through this reset. So those who pick up the pieces, if it won't be us, have something to go off. They have a reference point versus starting with whatever artificial history they'll put in that new version of the Matrix. That's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is all of this work, all of this consciousness awakening, all of this rising, all of this not giving in an inch will actually have the effect that we soften the blow of the reset, that we shift the direction of it, that we break up the matrix, however you want to call it. I don't even think we need to create heaven on earth. I think we need just to liberate heaven on earth. I think we had it. We just need to liberate it again. It's still here. It's still here waiting. So I really look forward to that new webinar. The others are in the description. What do you think? Until we come back to this Naked Truth show here, which I can't wait to do more often than once a month, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
What do you think right now, this very moment as people are watching this? What matters the most right now? Because energies are shifting. What matters the most right now?
I think what matters to me is to be true to myself and everybody to be true to who they are. And that sounds kind of easy, but ask yourself, who are you? Who are you really, right? It's not like we haven't addressed that question before, but I think it's always good to remind yourself of that kind of fundamental question, like, who are you in the world? If you don't know who you are, I mean, how do you create, if you don't have a what do they call it, a meta view of your life, then what are you doing? Are you just coasting, just waiting for the next Nintendo station, the bigger screen, the better, ear pods, or the Apple Vision, or whatever it is, right? Is that what it's about? Or is there a reason for you to have chosen to be here right now? And once you know who you are, if you can figure that out, then why are you here? What is your mission? And so for me, this is something that I have to, even still, I'll concede, have to remind myself, because I have moments where I'm, on the ground, right? I'm not sure anymore. I'm doubting myself. I'm doubting, you have these flashes and you go into fear and then you're asking yourself, well, wait a minute, where's that coming from? Is that fear that is being directed at me through some directed energy weapon, and you go into a conspiracy mode right away, right? Or is it, you can psych yourself out very easily, much more powerfully than a directed energy weapon. You can talk yourself out of doing anything. And yet at the same time, with Anthony Robbins and people like that in our past, it's proven that we can talk ourselves into anything too, as well, right? Like what are some of those films that have been out there that are talking about, you can manifest things like that. It's true, right? But at the same time, if you make it a religion, it becomes an obsession. So I think it's healthy to keep some of those things in your tool bag when you have those moments of doubt and moments of fear. And, when you're in that place, just take a step back and ask yourself, who's in fear right now? And what are you ultimately afraid of? Right? Because ultimately the universe actually wants to carry each one of us, because all of us individually put together make up the whole. So individually, we are a piece of the whole. And the universe wants to experience success as well through us. It can only experience it through us. That's why we're here. So that's what I would say to anybody who's listening. Just, be in touch with yourself, observe yourself. Don't get lost in the hysteria. It's going to go down. I think that's why it's good we're doing this show more often. It's going to start going down pretty crazy. And we're going to have a lot of doubt, and we're going to be questioning a lot of stuff that we used to believe. And so we want to, help ourselves, guide ourselves through seeing how to navigate through this treacherous territory that we're heading into.
Hey, the naked truth, my friends. This is what we're going to do. I second that wholeheartedly. Like you said it beautifully. This show is really, we just wanted to have a format that sort of forces us to come back. We're all branching off. We're doing but we're also inspired to come together and co-create, right? And sometimes you just have to create a vessel. So this is the vessel, the naked truth. We're going to do this more often. We have a plethora of subjects that we want to blow the lid off. And probably we're going to get some shit for that, because usually what most people see and what we tend to see is a little different. So we're going to do that on a few subjects. And we're not going to shy away from controversial subjects either. Because if this is not the time where you're willing to speak up, right, and speak the truth, then I don't know what would be the time. So
hey, let me ask you something.
Sure.
You know, because
you can ask me anything. We're co-hosting this, brother.
Right. So I get to ask you questions now too. So the thing is,
you're just falling into that role, I see.
I'm sorry, and I apologize that I've been kind of hogging a lot. Maybe
no. There's a dynamic here. We built a dynamic over years now.
Right.
It's all good.
So what I want to ask is, like, you know, you are. I've noticed a lot of things on your website that are helping people to prepare, like, you know, food things and gold or currency and stuff like that. Where do you draw the line between when you do something like that? Are you actually contributing to manifesting the disaster, or where do you see that? Like, what is the point of doing that? Do you see, you know what where I'm getting at with that question?
Yeah, sure. Well, to me, it's like, I have been in this sphere of thinking, exploring, consciousness exploring, and also hardcore conspiracies in the world and uncovering those for most of my life. So it's not like, oh, I'm just coming into this over the last few years. It's not COVID. It's not any of these things. We were in it. So when you're in it for long enough, it's like David Icke says, when you know what the desired outcome is, you can see the journey. And this journey has multiple crises. It has, huge catastrophes built into the journey. Now, while we are working on this other timeline, right, that we don't want those huge disasters in there, but while we're building it, we're not there yet. So we are in this, we're in this shift dynamic. And one aspect of the work is, yeah, sure, I want to keep this body alive. I want to make sure that we're set up for out of the ordinary circumstances so we can continue building this timeline. The whole other aspect of this is, what kind of life is it when all of your essential needs are depending on structures and systems you have no control over, and you have to depend on the store opening? You have to depend on the food being on the shelf, produced by people you never met, shipped by people you never met, owned by people you never saw. So what kind of life is that? So the idea is, yes, prepare, but not just prepare, shift your lifestyle to self-reliance, personal responsibility. That's really the main point here. And like, we have high net worth individuals watching our show too, right? So we have people that have made a lot of money. And not everybody you've thought about, well, what happens if this currency that my value is in keeps devaluing every day? Now, the dollars, compared to just a few short years ago, it's maybe worth 50 cents on a dollar, truthfully, if you look at the expenses that you have. So then we go, what do we do to preserve some of the value that we created, right? And then we go, okay, this might be an option. This is something that's been around for thousands of years, like gold, silver, precious metals. That's what we do. Honestly, we bought precious metals because I honestly think that through whatever we're going through, that won't just magically go away.
Well, there's going to be a transition period no matter what, where it won't hurt for you to have some kind of a liquidity to be able to trade with people until.
Well, do you think that the consciousness is going to shift from one day to another and nobody's going to want currency or a means of exchange? That's a process, and we're not even close to that consciousness collectively that would allow for that either. So this is where we stand. But the preparedness factor is like also, hey, be smart. Winter's coming. There's a blizzard forecast. It's not like if you stay outside in your shorts and if you don't take certain steps, you're going to suffer the consequences. So I can't put it any other way. And by the way, people have seen this now. Over the last years, we have had so many disasters and so many artificially infused events where a lot of people saw, hold on, if I had a backup, and since I had a backup, I coasted through it a lot better. Since I had a system, a support system, since we kind of knew this was coming, we coasted through it better. I don't put
it gives you peace of mind, right? It gives you a certain peace of mind that you don't have to panic if something happens. So it's an attachment with non-attachment.
Sure. But you bring a jacket when you go into the mountains, right? In October.
No, I always go topless.
You see what I mean? This is not where my mind is all day, every day. I know, like the prepper scene, that's all they do. And no, that's not it. It's just an aspect of this journey. And I think as long as we're in this physical reality, we need to take care of our physical needs as well, right? I mean, that's just how I see it. What's your take on this? Do you have an emergency food stash?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that everybody should just have, because it's like, seriously, you don't necessarily know. If anything, the last 4 years have taught us that if lockdowns happen, what do you, I mean, you want to be a victim? I mean, the thing is, you don't even have to do much. You can buy a bag of rice,
yeah,
a big bag of rice, and you can live on. I mean, there are people in China that almost live on rice for most of their lives because they can't afford anything else, right? So there are certain things that it's just smart to have in your life. And I think that for me, it's just, it's a given that you take certain precautions. I don't go overboard. I don't have even holding weapons in Germany is a little bit different, I think, from the States. I can't say that if I was living in the States, I wouldn't, because when I was at the Arlington Institute with my host, John Peterson, after it was over, he drove me around town in Berkeley Springs, and we went into some sort of supply stores, and they had like guns on the wall. And I'm like, well, I could just get a gun right now and walk out of here with it. And I probably would if I was living in the States, right? Not because I'm obsessed with guns, but I think everything in balance. And being in balance means that you aren't, when you don't have any of that stuff, it means you're not in balance. Because if they do lock something down and you are then in a situation where you're running to get whatever's left, then you have what you see in those movies, all these fanatics running around the store, beating each other up like they do on Boxing Day. To get the last bit of something, but at this time it's for survival, so it's much more brutal. So yeah, I think I see it absolutely as being essential, and it's part of the consciousness. You train your consciousness, and you have to take care of your consciousness, and you have to take care of your physical material surroundings, and anything other than that is actually kind of irresponsible.
I think you got to be streetwise. There's this famous story that Wayne Dyer used to tell. And he would say, that he had this book in his program. There was a spiritual solution to every problem. And then he was a runner, right? So for years and years, he would run 10 miles every day. And so he said, I was in this city, I had shows or whatever, and I was running one night. And, I got into a part of town I didn't know. And so it wasn't really good. It was a shady part of town. And then there was obviously a gang right in front of me on a sidewalk, like 100 feet in front of me. And he said, I mean, you could tell right away this was not good, right? So he said, I didn't keep running on that side of the street and thinking, oh, I have a spiritual solution to every problem. He said, guess what I did? I turned around. I ran the other way. That was streetwise. This is street smart. You got to be street smart. Yes. I mean, we live in this world. We got to be street smart. And to just say, yeah, I'm just unicorning my way for everything. Well, good luck with that. I mean,
I know I've heard of people that were like super, like cool people, and they went to London and walked down on the street because they were too dumb to think about the cars being on the wrong side, and boom, it was over. It's like in an instant, right? So, that's the difference between reality and a simulation, I guess. The simulation doesn't hurt. This reality does.
And I'm never in my life was I a fan of the fist, right? But shit, if I have to use it, I'll smack you. I don't care. If you're in my face, if you attack me, I'll smack the shit out of you. And that's just what will happen then. I might pray with you later and hope that you'll be better and you'll learn something, but I have no problem with that. So, as long as we can go as high as we want in our perspectives, right? But we also need to remain grounded, and that is the balance of this lifetime. This is it for me. Otherwise, of course, you can live in an ashram and you can be secluded. But there's somebody who has to deal with sweeping the floors, bringing the food, securing the perimeters. It might not be you, but somebody has to. See, the Buddhist monks, they say this. The monks, they say this. We don't have to worry about the all the things that you have to deal with in the world out there. We just worry about consciousness. Wonderful, but they at least acknowledge that somebody else has to do the other shit. And that's, you know, we're doing both. I think we're doing this and we're doing that.
Yeah, I definitely take the garbage out and clean the kitty litter.
Yep. No, actually, I have one of my kids clean the kitty litter, so there you go.
Lucky you. Well, when Tanya's here, she cleans it. So thankfully, but she's away, and she says hello, by the way. So, and interestingly, she was at the CERN facility and saw the cyclotron. So, you know, we've had actually.
You know what? We got to have some eyewitness reports from Tanya. So give her my love, and tell her for the next Naked Truth, we need at least a report of what happened there. So Frank, let's do this again very soon. I'm trying to get Frank into earlier 2 times a month. So let's see if we can make that happen. Thanks for the first Naked Truth show. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, John. It was an honor, and as always, and I think we had a lot of fun. I hope the people did too.
I sure hope so too. Much love to everybody. Check out the links in the description, Frank's webinars. And as always, we love you. We appreciate you, and we'll be back with you again very, very soon.